Yo, welcome to another month in review. This time we're talking about Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game that deals with a lot of important themes and topics, and I'll get to a few in this video, but I try to make these lighthearted, and since things like mental illness and depression are core parts of this game, I'm just gonna act a fool to try to offset it, just so we're all on the same page. So I had heard some pretty good reviews of this game before playing it, but I wasn't really that interested since when it first came out, it looked like a slow-paced game. And then God of War came out, which is damn near the exact same story, but less interesting FYI. And I was like, okay, this is pretty action-oriented, maybe I'll check out that Hellblade game. Never did. Then fast forward to the Game Awards last year when this happened. Alright, so here's a little about me. I like Blinks the Time Sweeper, crab legs, and aggressive, scary women. So when I saw this, I was sold on the entire franchise. And that's how I started playing. But the first thing that we have to talk about when talking about this game is the story, because that's like 75% of the appeal of this game. You play as Senua, a badass lady with psychosis on a Nordic journey to save the soul of her love. Since it's a Nordic journey, that means we're getting Ragnarok references, Odin references, Loki references, the whole fucked up family, except for Thor. At least I don't think Thor is mentioned in this game, but I didn't get all the lore stones, so I might have missed that. Now, the reason that I used the most generic possible description of this game is because the story is the most important part of the game, and I don't think playing this just for the gameplay is the right way to play. Don't get me wrong, the combat specifically is dope as fuck, and I'll get to it in a bit, but I don't know if it'll carry a person through the entire game. And before going any further, I'm gonna follow the game's lead and put a quick disclaimer that this shit is not for the faint of heart. We good? Bet. Alright, this game is intense, and I don't mean that lightly. Sure, games like Dragon Ball FighterZ is intense, Call of Duty is intense, camping is usually intense, but Hellblade is on a different level. Just from the way that Ninja Theory takes the concept of having a character with psychosis is going to do that. Now, you might not know what psychosis exactly is. I know I didn't when I started, so here's a quick definition for y'all. Psychosis is a mental disorder characterized by disconnection from reality which results in strange behavior, often accompanied by perception of stimuli, things like voices, images, and sensations, and other hallucinations. Alright, cool, but what the fuck does that mean for the game? That means that the developer did everything in their power to make sure that you understand what Senua and people like her go through during the game. The most apparent way that they do this is through the 3D audio. They even have a disclaimer saying that headphones are recommended, and that's how I played it. Usually I don't, but I tried it for this game. I don't think it's even worth playing it now if you don't have the headphones, because you'd be missing out on what I think is the best part of the experience. With that 3D audio, you hear different voices in your head. Some helpful, others not so much. And they alternate distance and which ear too, so imagine walking along and thinking about those roast beef sandwiches from Arby's. They have the meats, you know. And while thinking about those, all you hear is, yo, Arby's isn't even that good. Mike is short for Chief Keef ain't no hitter. Richtofen noises. It's basically just ASMR of the game. And while this is happening throughout the entire game with varying degrees, personally it never got annoying to me. But I have an omnipresent voice in my head too, so it was just like having a mini party in my head. This is probably the most interesting aspect of the game since it's both a story element and also how you get some important information, like knowing when to dodge, block, or some slight puzzle hints since, if you haven't noticed, there's no HUD in this game. In fact, there isn't even a fucking tutorial, which is both dope because I like figuring things out, but also seems like a massive oversight on a game that seems to want to be inclusive and accessible. Like yes, the voices will sometimes give you gameplay hints outside of combat, like there was one point where I was wandering around and one of the voices asked if I was lost. Rude, like maybe I'm just enjoying the scenery, damn. But if you don't actually know what to do or where to go, you out of luck, my G. Better pop open a YouTube tab and check out a quick tutorial because the game isn't telling you shit, and I didn't have a problem with that until I hit this part here. So, you're just supposed to cross this piece of wood. It's something that you've done at least 3 or 4 times before, so you're like, okay, this'll be a breeze. You are going to fall off dumb times because you won't know what to do. You think that, oh, maybe you just need to hit the action button to keep your balance. Nope. Okay, maybe you should stop moving to keep your balance. Nope, you are supposed to adjust the camera to regain your balance. Okay, that's an interesting way to do that, making it feel like you're actually adjusting your equilibrium. Cool. If the game didn't have a death counter, this wouldn't even really be a problem. So, right after your first sword fight, you learn that every time you die, Senua gets Ryu's arm from Ninja Gaiden 3, and when the Milky Way Dick Vein finally reaches Senua's head, it's game over forever and you gotta start from the beginning. Since the game is like a max 8 hours long, that's not so bad, but because you don't have a concrete number, every death seems like it might actually be your last. This is the first time in a while where death felt like an actual problem and an ever-present issue. This is where I think that the way this game is structured is really interesting. The entire game is essentially designed in a way to make you feel uneasy, either through the constant whispers, the constant fear of death, or some of the mad oppressive level design. You feel like everything is against you and it's awful. Not like the game is awful or how it's implemented is awful, but the feeling is. There's this theme of the darkness throughout the game, and in these situations you can feel the darkness seep out of your screen and headphones, and it's an overwhelming and harsh feeling. It gets even worse when you start hearing this guy
think that I would let you go, that you lost me back in the wilds. I will never let you go. You can't get rid of me. I am your shadow.
Who, no spoilers, is important to the story. Now, I think I had a different reaction because this type of voice is my favorite just because it's so deep and bassy. But I can't help but love it. The character is a dickhead and a bad person, but that voice, ooh wee. Now let's talk about the combat, because once you get it down and can start doing lockdown combos and just straight up beating ass, I think it's great, but those initial first battles are gonna test you if you're like me and didn't pause the game yet to see the controls. I learned by just hitting different buttons, but I hadn't hit B and didn't know that I could break dudes' blocks, but I still learned that relatively early in the game, so it's really not even that bad. The bosses. Fuck the bosses. Okay, so personally, I don't think that their inclusions matter to the story too much, so I think it's safe to talk about them. There's 3 main bosses, and then a fucking boss rush at the end. What's cool is that you can choose which of the first 2 you want to fight first. I fought Valrain first, who is just like those bird guys from Sekiro, and his fight was pretty cool. By that point in the game, I still didn't know what B did, so that could have been helpful, but the fight wasn't too bad. It was still pretty interesting. Then after Valrain, I fought Surt, who I thought was named Surtur, but I guess Marvel lied to me. This fight was more interesting because by this point, I was giving out hands, and Surt has this thing where he just gets tired and needs a break, but you can smack him out of it, so that's always fun. The last boss fight is against Fenrir, but like the grossest version I've ever seen. This fight had my first glitch where I died, spawned back in, and couldn't draw my sword, so that was fun. Fenrir has this thing where he goes to turn off the lights during the fight to save on electricity, and you have to block when he jumps out at you to practice for a Nordic surprise party. His fight is alright. But then, at the end of the game, a bunch of shit is going on and you have to fight Valrain again. Okay, you killed it once, easy work. Then Valrain turns into Surt. Another fucking Valrain pops up and you have to fight against these 2 as they switch between all 3 bosses. I'm always going to be a fan of a boss rush if I like the combat, and by this point I was going crazy with my sword skills, so I was excited for more fights. Even though the combat is the most basic sword combat ever, I had a lot of fun with it, and you can end up doing some decent damage once you figure out some good strings. The last thing that I want to talk about with this game is that this game is the closest thing to a horror game I've ever played. I already talked about how this game makes you feel uneasy, but like there's some genuinely frightening parts of the game, and again, because everything in the game is connected, the fear comes more from not knowing what's chasing you and the fear of uncertainty. But there's also just some straight up disturbing shit, like this wall of hands that are trying to dap you up, which is even worse now given, you know, the shit that they said was gonna be over in April. Anyway, I really enjoyed Hellblade, and if any of this sounded interesting, I definitely say to check it out. But you should also know that this game is way more emotionally taxing than I really let on, and I do think that it's important to have more stories like this, and that it's important to champion the good ones like this. Don't think that this is just an action game, it's really not. It's like a brutally honest therapy session for Senua that also allows you to just stab some dudes. I do want to put out a video or just do something related to the story because I think that it deserves to be talked about. Maybe one day, I don't know. Ninja Theory also put out a making of style documentary for this game, and I definitely recommend checking that out too to get a better look into how they went about telling Senua's story. Links in the void underneath the video. Next month's game is going to be Kiwami 2. It dropped like 3 days ago on the Game Pass, and I just know it's going to take over my life for the next month, so just look forward to that. Let me know what games I should check out for September though, and thanks for watching.